name is Suresha and I'm a somatic educator, and this is the third in a series of videos on somatic intelligence. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can discover and retain your body's own neutral, balanced baseline. Now, there are a lot of different systems in the body that you can achieve balance within, and there are a lot of approaches to achieving that balance. For example, there's the fluid systems, there's energetic systems, there's vascular system, nervous system. A lot of people have ways to balance the soft tissue fields. But in this video, I'm just going to focus on the hard frame. I'm going to focus on how we can balance the skeletal system, because this is the optimal system to receive gravitational forces and to transmit forces that are generated up through your body by the use patterns, by the way that you use your body every day. Now, the optimal way for gravity to come down through the skeleton is right down through this pathway that comes down through your ear, through the middle of your shoulder. It's going to come down through the greater trochanter right in here, pass through your knee, and this little guy's a little bit hyperextended, and down through the ankle right here, the lateral epicondyle. Now, when you're young, when you're a toddler, quite naturally, the posture comes into the optimum position in gravity. It springs out on its own, but as we age, as the personality develops, feelings start to shape the form, and use patterns start to develop, you can see the drift. And now the chest is going to be dropped a little bit, maybe it's going to lean back a little bit, the pelvis is going to be slightly askew. And so according to whatever ways that you have used your body and the ways that it has formed, we're going to find where you are now. Basically, there's going to be the you are here part of your GPS system, and you are going to be the programmer to take that location and bring it back to neutral, which we are going to call home. Now, I just want to thank at the very beginning some of my teachers who have shown me how to access and shift and balance some of the forces that do accumulate in bone, namely Drs. Chauffeur, Barral, and Corbier. And I want to thank Dr. Tom Hanna for showing me the functional way to achieve balance and integration in the system. Now, one of the things that I want to make sure that you know is that in Volume 5 of my books on somatic intelligence, there are several pages, probably 40% of the book is going to include pages of exercises and movements and awareness practices that you can use in order to achieve integration and balance in specific areas of the body, and using soft tissue systems as well as the skeletal system at the same time. Many of them are going to be involving making somatic adjustments to various yoga asanas and some sports stretches and things that you'll be able to, once you understand the principles, you'll be able to easily apply them to whatever it is that you're doing, including, the Pilates, or if you're using exercise balls or doing weights or so forth. So do consider picking up Volume 5. Now, I met Dr. Hanna, of course, while I was at the physical therapy clinic, as I mentioned in the first video. And at that time, one of the reasons that those questions started to arise about the influence of bones is because I noticed when people would fall, whether they fell from skis or from a horse or from a bicycle, got hit as a pedestrian, went up in the air and landed, or whether there was a car accident, that they would report these symptoms in the body that would travel. They would travel after being treated. They would travel from one week to the next or one day to the next. And I got curious about what that trajectory, that line of force was that was creating that trajectory of the symptoms. And so I was asking them questions like, where were you sitting in the car when it was hit? Where was the car hit? Where was your body when you landed from that fall? Which parts of your body landed first? Where was that sequence? And I wanted to see if I could track and correlate, those impacts. and the trajectories of the lines of force, and how to help them to unravel that as a whole throughout the whole system in order to release the shock and the trauma, but also to help the system to reset. Now again, in the first video we talked about accessing those subconscious files in order to bring them up to conscious awareness so that you can create changes. Now, in order for your brain to be able to participate with you consciously, we're going to be working with a different part of the brain. So the files are here. We're going to bring them up to the light of conscious awareness into the parietal lobe here. And that's going to be mostly involving the sensory motor cortex and the premotor cortex, which is a little anterior, where your brain is going to get activated as soon as you're learning something new. Now, for your body to be able to participate, and this is the other reason I want to use the skeleton, we're going to engage the receptors, the proprioceptors, in and around the joints where they are the most plentiful, and as well as in the base of your feet. We're going to achieve these changes by the kinesthetic sense, which is the sixth sense. The sixth sense is not intuition, as we've been told. For these purposes, it's going to be the kinesthetic sense, or the spatial orientation sense, that also works with balance. Now, some of the most common senses that we use, of course, the visual sense, the sense of hearing, sense of taste. If you, by middle age, you've greatly enhanced your sensory awareness, of your perception, of your palette of colors that you're able to perceive and enjoy, the range of tastes and colors that you're able to perceive and enjoy, because you just tuned in more, you just focus more. The same is true for the kinesthetic sense. I know it's new for a lot of people. You haven't paid attention to how it feels in your bones, or in relationship with your bones to your soft tissue. But in doing so, more and more, you'll become more and more sensitized to it, and you'll be able to participate more efficiently and effectively while you program your GPS for your brain, so that it will be able to tell you also very accurately where you are in space in relation to the most balanced position. And then optimally, before you sit down, before you go for a hike, before you go for your weekend warrior activities, you will start from a place of balance, and when you come home, you can end in a place of balance. Now, the foundation for this balance is going to be the feet. This is where we have so many proprioceptors, and this is also the foundation and the base for the load-bearing structures, the legs, and all the way up the chain, and they affect everything else. So it's really important to have balance in the feet. So let's talk about that for a little while. The feet are very complex structures with delicate architecture. They have 100 muscles, ligaments, tendons, 26 bones per foot, thousands of nerve endings, and several blood vessels, entry and exit points for energetic systems, and they process thousands of tons of forces per day without doing anything special like jogging or dancing. So they are remarkable, to tell you the truth. But that said, it's all happening in a very small contained space, each structure of which has a very strong influence on other structures. So if anything becomes out of alignment there and compressed, it's going to create a restriction very easily that is also going to influence things all the way up the chain. Now, the relationship to all the structures within the foot is quite delicate and essential, but also the balance between what's happening in the foot and its relationship to the ankle just above it. Now, you can see in these images here, this would be a normal structure. This would be a normal balance between the foot and the ankle that comes directly horizontally up. But many people have a slight supination, pronation, and some have a more extensive one. It's also common to have a pronation in the opposite direction, where maybe you have a high arch with a high instep, or maybe you have some kind of arch support inside your foot that's throwing your foot on the lateral edge. And in any case, that all the way up the chain influence is going to do things that compress the knee on the outside, that strain the structures, the tendinous attachments, and the ligaments at the knee. And if that relationship between the ankle and the knee is not optimal so that it comes straight up the middle of the knee, you're looking at many opportunities for wear and tear, and literally tears in these ligaments of the knee. And many people have experienced that. But not to worry if that's already happened to you, if you've already had an accident or at the ankle or at the knee, or if you're trying to avoid surgery, you can still retain balance through the techniques that I'm about to show you. Okay, we're ready to feel into where you are now in your system in relation to the heart frame, and see what adjustments need to be made in order to find your neutral balance. And it was really important initially to help you to understand the process and what you're doing and why you're doing it and what the communication process is for your brain, so that you'll be able to do it on your own whenever you want to. And again, starting with the feet, just go ahead and whatever surface you're standing on, whether or not it's wooden or carpeting, just feel what the carpet is like. And I know that for my sense, and maybe just see what you feel, most of the sensation I'm getting now, I'm picking up from the sensitized bottom of my feet, are actually the inside of my shoes. So this is going to be the case whenever you're walking around and going outside with shoes on. Your feet are going to be dealing with whatever's happening inside of your shoes, and it's going to have to go through that to the soles of your feet, and then negotiate what's happening between the bottom of your shoes and the surface that you're standing or moving on. So see what that's like initially with your feet inside your shoes, and then for the purposes of getting a little bit clearer information from your feet, go ahead and take them off. I know that because I tend to pronate, I have arch supports in my shoes, and that throws my feet out to the lateral edge like I was describing earlier, and it actually wears my shoes that way. So it really helps me to be able to come back to balance after, a few hours of being pushed out to the lateral edge that way. Okay, so with your feet now, with all of their sensors available to get an idea of what the floor is like and what their relationship to the floor is like, see where you are on your feet in relationship to whatever surface you're standing on, and see where the pressures are on your feet, so you can notice where your posture is in gravity. Just check and see whether you tend to be on your heels, on your balls. A lot of people have a stance where they're loading the outside of one leg and the inside of the other leg. Maybe you injured one leg at one point and you shifted and you never shifted back. It's super, super common. And sometimes there's just a dominant leg, so the pressures build up differently in terms of the musculature as well. And now we're just going to adopt some of these postures that we talked about earlier, where there's a pronation on one side. So just go ahead and pronate on one side and see what that does up the chain. See what it feels like in the medial side of the leg and in the knee. And go ahead and supinate on the other side. So this is inversion and eversion. And that said, it's really important and helpful if you do have that fluidity of articulation in both directions. Many people that I meet have gotten compressed in the subtalar joint in this area of the ankle where they're not able to evert, and that creates an enormous amount of strain and tension all the way up the lateral side of the leg. But just for sensory purposes and waking up these areas, go ahead and put pressure on the medial side of the foot and on the lateral side of the foot. And feel what it's like all the way up the leg when you have pressures that are not in the middle. Some of you may have bow legs or high arches, and now your pressure is going to be on the lateral side of both feet. And some of you might be what they call, when I was growing up anyway, knock-kneed. You might be knock-kneed, where you have the pressures on the medial side of each leg. Sometimes that's just a matter of a internally rotated femur, and that creates that same dynamic, that same
structure, so some of that can be corrected as well. Now let's just go ahead and shift forward and back, side to side, and find that sweet spot from right to left so you don't feel any pressure on the right side or the left side of the leg, on the medial side or the lateral side of the leg. Come right in the sweet spot in the middle. It's like you draw a straight line. And now we're going to intersect that with forward and back. So you're just going to move forward and back. You're going to put your weight forward onto your toes and feel that softness of the ball of the foot, and lean back onto your heels and feel the firmness of that calcaneus, so that heel bone. It's a very strong bone. Lean forward and just see when you come out of plumb in the anterior direction how you're going to load the soft tissue with those lines of force that would otherwise be going through bone. So just lean forward and see what it feels like when the pressures come through the anterior of the body. So your anterior tibialis, right next to the tibia, your quads are going to tighten. You're going to feel pressures up into your belly and chest if you're leaning forward. And if you're leaning back, then the back side of your body is going to grab. So your calves are going to grab, your hamstrings are going to tighten, your glutes are going to tighten, and you're going to feel extra tone all the way up your spine if you are in a lean back posture. Now, same as we did for side to side, just rock forward and back. And now you're going to intersect that vertical line with a horizontal line. And you're going to find this point between your heel and the ball of your foot, which basically is going to wind up optimally over the arch. So where you don't feel any pressure in the front of your body, and the muscles in the front, soft tissue in the front, or the soft tissue in the back, soft tissue on the side, or on the lateral side or on the medial side. And that's going to be your optimal standing posture for the soft tissue, because the bones are carrying the load that they're meant to carry. Well, let's try that functionally. Let's see in relationship, joint by joint, how that balance feels, and if it's balanced in a way that also supports joint function. So just move your foot back and forth. Move your foot back and forth through the ankle and see how it feels side to side for the ankle. Does it feel like your foot and your ankle are in the optimum relationship? Like there's no additional strain or tension front to back or side to side. And then gauge that up through the knee and see if you feel like through the knee there's no additional tension on the medial or lateral side of the knee. If there is, just make tiny little adjustments forward and backward or side to side until you're in that sweet spot as you move. And you're going to want to retain that as you walk. If you do, you're going to find an effortless walk. Okay, now let's integrate the pelvis and the hip joints, which are a little deep in, right? It's way in here. And there's several muscles that attach in here and all around and are very deep to the bone and to the pelvis, that if things are out of whack, out of alignment with the feet and the ankles, it is going to impact all the way up through the pelvis and of course above. But just know that there have been many, many times when just working with the feet eases out tensions all across the pelvic area. So there are many different ways that the pelvis can shift its organization in space and in relationship to the rest of the body. And each shift is going to affect other areas of the body. And right now, since we've already had a felt sense of balance through the joints below, let's just do some discovery about what changing the position of the pelvis does to the joints below. Now, as we notice for this little toddler, the correct and most optimal position in space did kind of follow that plumb line down through those joints, and it produces a lordotic curve in the spine, and there are other curves in the spine that are also there as shock absorbers and receive forces optimally. So check for yourself though what you notice with your hips and your knees and your ankles and your feet with your pelvis in the lordotic curve. Your low back in the lordotic curve, which arches your pelvis a little bit as well. So check that and compare it with a flat back. And just notice what happens with a flat back in your hip joints and where it goes into your knees, what forces are in your knees, what happens in your ankles, and the pressures in your feet. So I'm kind of leading the narrative a little bit on that because that is what I notice in my body. I notice all these additional pressures in the joints below from this position. However, you know, in certain cultures, they do use a flat back, and all the years that I spent in martial arts, we were always told to flatten our pelvis. There's something about having a wide stance. So when you have a wide stance, it's much easier to move in the ways that you're going to move in those techniques, using those techniques when your back is flat. And there's probably something also, you know, theoretically about the way that the energies move up the spine when your back is flat, and the ease of movement and changing direction with that position. However, when you're just standing or walking and your feet are closer together, it just feels more spacious in the joints in my system. Check your own though when the lordotic curve is there. Now the other thing that happens, and it could be just you know, sitting and slumping or whatever at a desk or whatever, but when you get and it's hard for my body to do that without bending my knees. You know, it's hard to do posterior tilt or a tuck in the pelvis without the knees bending as well. And you do see that in a senile posture, that the knees bend and the chest drops. Conversely, when you have the lordotic curve, then this is so easy. This is one of the easiest ways, I think, to maintain a correct posture rather than trying to use muscles to pull your shoulders back where they would normally be on top of your thorax, is if you can maintain this balance in the joints below so that it's easy for your pelvis to adopt that natural curve. Now you don't have to use muscles to put your chest and your shoulders where they belong, because they'll quite naturally go there on their own. So check for yourself, move side to side, front to back, and see what it feels like with your pelvis in different positions for your system, and find the neutral in your own body that includes your hip joints and the position of your pelvis. Before you sit down, before you go to drive, you do these other processes to come to neutral. There's much less likelihood that that's going to happen, and if you do feel that begin to shift, you'll be able to notice it because those areas are now awake and feeding back information and giving you that tracking information for your GPS that's going to keep you at home in your body, in your neutral, and in your balance.
Hi, my name is Shahida Kempter. I'm a Pilates teacher in Encinitas, California, and I started training Pilates when I was 50, and at 59 I had complete burnout starting to do somatic work was a huge help in my teaching Pilates. When I'm working, when I'm teaching, it brought me into more an embodied sense of myself. And it also allowed me to pay much more attention to myself when I'm teaching, and to bring the breath into it when I'm teaching, to learn to just pause when I feel my system being upgraded to maybe sympathetic mode. And it also let me teach my clients like that, and to stop when I found a place where there was sort of a block in their body or resistance, to teach them to move through that space with awareness and the breath, and to slow things down as opposed to pushing through it. So it allowed me to start teaching differently, and it allowed me to work with my clients where their bodies were, rather than thinking we just need to push through. There's a place to pause, to stop, and allow the body to release in those places, rather than strain in those places. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Katina Griffin. I'm a master trainer at the Daily Method, which is a ballet bar workout modality. We do a ton of core conditioning work using a bar for balance, if people are not familiar with that trend. I've been a practitioner of this modality of movement for 15 years now, and a recent year and a half have been experiencing some pretty just kind of continual repetitive use injuries, things that my body's just been in discomfort. And I found Suresha Hill and went under her guidance and supervision to learn this somatic education or re-education in my body. And what I'm finding is that ways that I've always moved just because my body could move in those ways due to flexibility or just the ways that I learned it in my dance background, were less than functional. And now as I'm getting older, was really finding it's not comfortable. And in this work, kind of all of the light bulbs that have been turned on for me of how I'm contributing, and then can kind of help facilitate myself in undoing certain patterns that I'm used to in movement, primarily like upper body work, and ways I can cue my students in a more kind of direct and subtle way versus kind of going to that nth extreme, which is what I've always done in movement. It's really been a game changer. I think the biggest epiphany though is just these little subtleties in this work that I've been doing has left me with more and more duration of time where my body feels at ease. There's no pain where there once was pain, even in sleeping and changing positions to lay on my side and my SI joint and low back, gone. And just feeling like my body, I'm happier moving in my body than I have been in a really long time. And if anybody has the same curiosity, if you're a practitioner of movement, I just think that it's a huge tool in your toolbox to help you understand your own movement patterns and what's going on that maybe you don't even know is going on. Because the knowledge we get to share with students thereafter, there's kind of like a ripple effect, and it's been a positive one for me. So I hope you are curious enough to check it out.